There's at least one thing that everybody in this room has in common, and that is that everybody in this room at some time in your life has been hurt, haven't you? Everybody in this room has been hurt by somebody. It may have been a bully in elementary school. Did any of you all know a bully in elementary school? Anybody at all? Come on. Am I the only one? The biggest bully in my elementary school, his name was Jackie, and he had a flat top. Remember flat tops? And he was mean. And Jackie was the meanest sixth grader. We went back in the dark ages. We went to elementary schools through sixth grade. And in sixth grade, Jackie was the ruler of Belmorris Elementary School. I hope he's not watching, because he'll find me. But on the kickball asphalt, the last day of sixth grade, the day of the sixth grade party, Jackie was inflicting his own form of punishment when a fifth grader who was new in school didn't know him and popped him in the nose. And Jackie bled and cried. And a whole school thanked God just in that moment together. But all of us have been hurt, haven't we? Maybe by a bully. We may have been told we were loved by somebody who used us. We may have even been hurt in church, in Christian life. There's one thing in common. We've all been hurt. So the question I want to pose for us today is this. As we talk about the prayers of Jesus, how do we pray when we've been hurt? How do we pray when we've been hurt? And the sterling example is from the words of Jesus as he reflects on his own pain, which as badly as we've been hurt, he hurt more. It's the Gospel of Luke. It's one of the 7 last words of Christ. Luke chapter 23. 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. And when they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they divided his clothes by casting lots. And the people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. And they said, he saved others, let him save himself, if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one. And the soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, if you were the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was a written notice above him which read, this is the King of the Jews. How did he do it? Not just forgiveness. That's almost impossible to conceive. But how did he endure? How did he endure the farce of a trial, the 39 lashes? How did he endure carrying a cross until his body fell? How did he endure the humiliation, the curses, the jeering, the spitting, the screaming? I have to tell you, had I been there enduring what he endured, forgiveness would have been the very last thing on my mind. The mob curses, the religious leaders, the word, listen to the word. It sounds like something out of an old black and white movie. The religious leaders sneer before they walk back to the temple, having accomplished the task of putting him to death. You see, Jesus never gave a more complete impression of God than he did on the cross. I wish I'd thought of those words, but they're from a writer I appreciate. Jesus never offered a more complete impression of God than he did on the cross. And on the cross, this is a prayer. Father, forgive them. Now I want you to see the stage again. His back is ripped asunder, 39 lashes, rope embedded with rocks and shards of metal, 39 times, up all night in a farce of a trial, walking up a hill, carrying a piece of lumber that would be his death instrument. I would have lashed out with all the venom and vinegar I had. But he didn't. He forgives. So how do we pray when we've been hurt? I think it's alien to human beings to forgive. I don't think it's a part of our DNA. You go all the way back to Cain and Abel. Sibling rivalry starts with the very first family story told in the Bible. I think we have to understand that forgiveness is learned. And it's learned through the person of Jesus. To forgive is to be a true follower of Jesus. Other faiths have forgiveness in their beliefs, but none is ever so high as this standard from the cross. So in order to forgive, what do I have to do? If I'm going to pray when I'm hurt, and I want you to see what Jesus does. He looks at these people who are treating him worse than most of us have ever been treated, and he prays, please forgive them. How do I do that? Well, I only do that in a way he never could. I only do that when I realize that my sins grieve God just like theirs did. I don't know about you, but when I begin to compare my sins to others, I don't pick Mother Teresa to compare to. You know what I mean? I pick somebody who's a hideous, heinous criminal. I want to be compared to them. I want you to say, okay, that guy's doing 10 life sentences. I don't look nearly as bad compared to him. And then the Bible brings me back and says, but that's not the method of comparison. The method of comparison is, how do you reflect in the purity of God? But when we start talking about forgiveness, some of us, maybe in this room, some of us have been hurt so deeply, the pain so fresh, so deep, so vicious, so intentional. Some of us have been hurt so badly that it may seem like it's impossible for us to forgive. For a long time, we've talked about the dreadful things that have happened in the Roman Catholic Church. And the news just keeps coming. But only a few weeks ago, we Baptists had to say, us too. We're not immune. People in Baptist churches across the country and every denomination, every strata of society have done things to children that are unspeakably horrible. How do you forgive when you've been hurt like that? How do you forgive when the pain is something that haunts you till the day you die? One of the things, a friend of mine helped me. I was reading some ideas yesterday from a buddy of mine up in Richmond. He was writing about the parable of the prodigal son. And he said, you know, I just noticed today when I was reading the text again, the son doesn't ask for forgiveness. He doesn't ask for it. The Father just offers it. There are going to be people in your life who have hurt you who will not ask for your forgiveness. Those people on the cross, they're not asking Jesus for forgiveness, are they? They're yelling at him, screaming at him, cursing at him. Not a single one of them. One says, you know what? If you're going to paradise, I want to go with you. But the other one just absolutely throws off on him. But nobody in the crowd says, forgive us, for we don't know what we're doing. So how do we deal with those pains that are so deep? How do we deal with those things that we just can't get away from at night? I want to suggest something to you that's not in the text, But I think it helps us when we're dealing with pains that are so unspeakably horrible. We're wondering if they can ever be removed from our lives. And that is this, that we're not able to forgive completely in that moment as Jesus was. I don't have it within me. If I were on that cross, if there was going to be a sword pierced through my side, if I had flesh hanging out all over my back, if I had nails in my hands and my feet, there is no way that I would have been able to look at them and say, I forgive you. Just no way. I don't know about you. Maybe you're a lot more Christian than I am. Maybe you could have done it. But there's no way I could have done it. So how do we deal with those pains that are so deep and so raw? This is one way I have found that helps people. And that is this, that I realize that I am not God and I am not perfect and I am not sinless. But I also realize that I don't want to be haunted the rest of my life by an inability to forgive. So what I've learned in trying to help folks who've dealt with this kind of pain is this. That if I can forgive just a little bit more today than I did yesterday, just a little bit more, and if I can forgive just a little bit more tomorrow, and there are going to be days that I backslide, to use an old Baptist term, but if I can just go a little bit a day, and a day, and a day, in 6 months or a year or 5 years, the monsters won't own me anymore. And we'll notice that the pain is diminished ever so slightly. You see, forgiveness doesn't automatically stop other people from trying to hurt us. The same people who killed Jesus would later try to kill some of his closest associates. Unfortunately, they were not transformed from that moment of forgiveness. It didn't mean that from that moment on, the disciples would live pain-free lives, because they surely didn't. But what it did mean is this: they would not live resentment-filled lives. And that's a huge distinction. Because you probably know folks who are hurt, and I know folks who are hurt, who walk around every morning with that weight on their shoulders of pain that is not only nobody asked for forgiveness, but we've not tried to forgive. But here's what the disciples did. They went out and they witnessed and they shared and they loved. Do you remember the story, one of the vignettes at the end of the crucifixion? A Roman soldier who has seen more death than any of us can imagine looks at this dying man. This man was who he said he was. And it's all because he was able, in the excruciating pain of the cross, to forgive.